Welcome, everybody. It's good to see all of you. Tristan, do you want to go ahead and pull up our PowerPoint for us and we'll go ahead and get started?
Jacob, or would you be able to do the PowerPoint or Crystal?
No, I got it. I just need to be able to share my screen. I just sent you a message.
Sorry about that. Let me.
That's okay.
Co-host.
Thank you.
All right. Well, welcome. It is the last day of November. Hard to believe that tomorrow is December 1st. That's amazing. I hope all of you had some time over the last week for Thanksgiving with your family and friends, and just time to do some things for yourselves as well. So let's go ahead to the next slide there, Tristan. So I'm going to go ahead and let Tristan do roll call here. And let you know that Sean will be joining us at 2:45. He's just getting his class started and everybody moving there, and then he's going to join on. And then Jacob's going to take us just through really quickly, dive into our norms and expectations on our consensus and quorum information. Then we're going to dig right into some ARM pieces. And then be sure that we have time for closing today. So Tristan, I'm going to turn it over to you for roll call.
Sure. Thanks, Julie. How about we all answer, how was your Thanksgiving? I will start. Mine was wonderful. I went to Billings and spent family with the in-laws, or time with the in-laws, and just hung out and ate some yummy food. And then we'll start with Angela.
Hi, everybody. Good to see you. Happy Thanksgiving. I had a great holiday. I had some family in town, ate a lot of turkey, took a few hikes, and glad to be back here with all of you today.
Sounds nice. And Dan Schmidt.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy Thanksgiving, heading into December. Thanksgiving, let's see. You know what? For the first time all fall, I got to watch plenty of college football, so that made it great.
Happy for you. Dean.
I'm coming, sorry. I'm multitasking. My Thanksgiving was good. We went to Eastern Montana to see my family and for the first 3 days, and then came back and did another Thanksgiving on Sunday. So good week.
Wonderful. Nothing better than 2 Thanksgivings. And Diane.
Hi, good afternoon. I had a nice Thanksgiving. I didn't cook and I didn't watch football, but I had a lovely time earlier with my family.
Oh, good.
In Colorado.
Oh, good. Erica.
Thanksgiving was great. It wasn't restful, but it was fun. It was busy, full of family and travel and friends, and yeah, all good all across the board.
Oh, good. Thanks, Erica. Heather.
Hi, everyone. Happy Thanksgiving. It was a good holiday. I got to be home, spend time with my family and my dogs. So that was great. My puppy and I snuggled most of the break, which renewed me to come back to work this week. So that was great.
Oh, good. And then Jewel.
Good afternoon, everyone, and I guess happy December. I hope it's a great one for everyone. Thanksgiving was wonderful. I got to spend it with the majority of my kids in Billings.
That's wonderful. Nicole.
Hi, everyone. I went to Anaconda and spent time with my family for Thanksgiving. Ate a lot of food, watched a lot of football, and went to an ABBA cover band concert. So it was a good time.
It does sound like a blast. Nick.
Did they do the new ABBA album? That was the question.
Yeah, had a nice Thanksgiving. Thank you for asking.
Sorry, Jacob, what were you saying?
Well, I wanted to know if the band McCall saw did the new ABBA album or just all old songs?
I'm gonna say old songs because the only ones I knew, and I don't think I know any of the new ones.
All right, so Sharon is next.
All right. Well, happy post-Thanksgiving, everyone. I spent some time with family in Bighorn, Wyoming. I didn't cook. I didn't watch any football, and also I didn't hike. One of those things should change. Anyway, happy December, everyone.
It's crazy. It's already December. All right, Val.
Hi, everyone. Had a great Thanksgiving. I did cook, I did clean up, and I did watch a lot of football, and I am totally jealous of McCall.
Awesome. And then we've got our facilitators on. Crystal, how was your Thanksgiving?
Hi, everyone. It was just my husband, son, and I, so small and sweet since all our family's back east. We didn't get out of our PJs all day long, so that was great. My husband did all the cooking, which was even better. And we watched the parade, Macy's parade, because I used to go to it as a kid, and so I'm trying to get my son into it. And football for sure. Yeah.
Awesome. And how about Eric?
Yes, hi everyone. Welcome back. Hopefully we've got all got the good festive cobwebs out of our brains. I know it's been a little hard to start off the week. Myself had a good break, visited different branches of the family, and definitely consumed more calories than I should have.
Jacob.
Yeah, hello, everybody. Good to see everybody. If I missed the last meeting, I was on childcare duty that day and couldn't make the meeting. I too had a good Thanksgiving. Football was a big part of it. My little one now comes down the stairs every morning and then turns the corner and says football. So apparently we had too much of it on. But
Cute. Oh, it's fun. And we did have Sue jump on. Sue, we're just saying hi and letting everyone know how your Thanksgiving was.
Oh, well, thank you. And hello, everyone. I had a very quiet Thanksgiving. My husband and I just finished an addition to our cabin up in Eureka. And so we spent a quiet time there, just going through all the little details of things. So it was very nice, very quiet. All our Canadian neighbors are coming back. So we got to see them after a year and a half, which was a very nice thing to do. And yeah, so we just had a nice quiet time, and you can never have too much football.
And last but not least is Julie.
It was great, you guys. I went to Anaconda, got my brother and mom, brought them back to Helena, and had Thanksgiving here. And I decorated for the holidays and watched a lot of football too. So it was a really good time.
Awesome. Well, thanks, guys.
All right, Jacob, I'm just going to turn it over to you to quickly review our norms and expectations, and then we're going to dive in.
thanks, Julie. Updates from the last meeting that were relayed to me and to relay back to everybody who's joined us today was that there was heard from the group the discussion around the idea of a quorum. If we use our metrics for a supermajority of a vote as also being, do we need a supermajority of the group as a whole to equal a quorum? Then there are 18 members on this committee. That would mean we need approximately 12, and we have more than 12 here today, which would mean we have a quorum present. It is an irrelevant point now since we have enough here, but for any decisions we make today, we will have a quorum present. There were reasons behind sort of not defining this previously, but so we do not need to go into those because we have enough people here to make sure that we can move forward. So as we look at things today, if we come to a decision point where we have in the past need to take a vote, we will need 60% of those who are present today. And I think there are 15 group members on the call. my math is correct. So we'll need a supermajority of that number to move forward. And then, I know that we're making adjustments. Just, know that our work is to send recommendations forward to the superintendent. The superintendent will have all of the notes that Tristan is taking for us in the minutes to review as she looks at these decisions, and can look at, both sides of the discussion as it is held, know that, and keep that in mind as we move forward as well. And then she will take forth all of your suggestions, recommendations into the final decisions that she makes as we move forward as well. So with that, we always have great discussion. So I think we're ready to dig into where we left off last time, Julie. And I want to give big kudos to Julie. I know that she was up well past my bedtime last night working on this and sent many late emails. So thank you, Julie, for pulling all this together for the group, and it's much appreciated.
Thanks, Jacob. My pleasure. So you guys, just a few things in terms of what's happened since we last met. We did have our last task force meeting on the 16th. And then on the 18th, I do want you to know that we shared the final adoption timeline with the Board of Public Education, who did approve that timeline. Next slide, please. And so you guys, here's kind of that timeline so you kind of know where we're headed. So our recommendations will be going to the superintendent, and her recommendations will need to be to the board in time for the January 4th CISPAC meeting, where her recommendations will be shared with them on January 4th from 3:30 to 6:30, and that will be available via Zoom. So that's a special CISPAC meeting. And then those will be brought forward to the Board of Public Education on January 13th. So stay tuned, just so that you know that's information, and that's just the timeline that we're moving on. And moving to get final effective date of the rules on May 27th of 2022. Next slide, Jacob.
Crystal's on that. And then I think Angela had her hand up.
Thank you. Just a quick question. Good to see everybody again. So I just want to clarify. So it's sounding more like, even in this conversation, like the work of this task force then is going to be advisory to the superintendent, who then will bring it forth to the advisory board, to the Board of Public Ed. So is that a fair characterization of what's about to happen?
Yep. So these recommendations, Angela, well said. Recommendations go from this task force to the superintendent, and then that gets put into consideration. Then her recommendations will be shared with CISPAC on January 4th, and then with the board on the 13th of January. Okay, so we're done with that slide. Next one. I think we're good to go. Next slide. So we're going to move into you guys right away. And so we can go ahead and take this slide down. What I'd like to do is take a few minutes to kind of share with you where we left off on 1057-410, which was brought up in part of the conversation around, the alternative and accredited programs. And so the traditional pathway versus the alternative pathway. So I've taken a look, you guys, at a couple of states that are neighboring states, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, Idaho, as well as Alaska, just to have a rural state, and a couple of other states, Utah and Colorado as well. So I kind of want to jump into this, but I see that there are two people that have their hands up. Sharon and Diane, can I answer your question really quick before we dive in here?
You bet. Mostly mine is just a question for OPI. If you wouldn't mind sharing with us the final version that you submit to the superintendent, to this task force. And then also, and I know that's a bit of a follow-up, but then as a courtesy, what the superintendent shares with CISPAC then?
So Sharon, what we're going to do is take the information from today and put it in our tracker so that you can see all of that tracking as to what we had, what was current language, kind of the
Uh-huh.
changes, and then any additional changes that we add in today. So as soon as we get out of this meeting, we get that wrapped up, we'll get that to you guys by the end of the week, so you can see exactly the same thing that'll be forwarded to the superintendent.
Great.
And it
And
sounds
then-
like then you want to see what it looks like heading into CISPAC as well.
I would. I mean, I guess we can click on the link just like we had to the last time this happened, but since now that will contain whatever the superintendent's recommendation is, I just think it would help the task force to know what portions made it and which ones didn't, or, be that as it may.
Okay, Sharon, I will advocate for that, to be sure that, I'm sure that with
Thanks.
being at a public meeting at CISPAC, we're going to want to have that information available for public as well. So I'll definitely advocate for that.
Thank you.
I'll be
Diane,
fast.
did you have a similar question?
I do. My question is similar. It is that when the information goes, is there going to be tracking of the recommendations as they existed when Chapter 57 Task Force completed its work, and then a tracking of then what Superintendent Arnson recommends, so that there's a clear understanding of what happened at the task force level, and then the changes that were made by Superintendent Arnson are clear also, not just for us, but just for the record, so that it's easy for us to follow what happened, and others as well.
Okay, I've got that written down, you guys, that you would like to see that and be able to track those changes in a form that kind of you can follow, if you will. And you guys have had such a strong investment, so appreciate all of that. Okay, so guys, I just wanted to quickly go through this. I thought this would be important because I think this is part of the conversation that we're having right now that we left off in our last meeting around with ALT program. Are we going to require them to have a restricted out-of-state license and potentially some years of experience, or are we going to treat ALT programs the same as a traditional pathway or differently? And so I thought it would just take some time to kind of sum up really quickly, you guys, an analysis in a chart here. So taking a look at Alaska, Alaska does not distinguish between a traditional or an alternative pathway. What they do in Alaska is they have what they call an interim license that everyone applies for 2 years before they can get a professional license. And then they have the same requirements for everyone within those first 2 years of what they have to do in that initial license before it moves to a professional. So it's kind of different how they treat that. Okay, moving down, and I'm just going to kind of quickly summarize this to give you guys an essence of kind of what is expected in some states that are surrounding us or like us. Colorado does not distinguish between an ALT program or traditional program. They call it an approved preparation program that must lead to licensure in the state where your program was approved. You don't have to be licensed in that state, but you must be eligible to hold a license in that state. And then they have the same requirements for both programs with a bachelor's degree, an approved preparation program, and demonstration of coursework and a praxis exam. Looking at Idaho, you guys, they do distinguish between the two. Now they recognize programs as accredited programs through a professional agency such as CAPE. In the state of Idaho, all of their EPP programs are approved through the CAPE process. So how they distinguish between it is that if you must have a copy of a current valid out-of-state certificate if you did not complete an accredited program through NCATE, Tech, or CAPE in the last 2 years. If you did complete a program that was certified by, for example, CAPE in the last 2 years, then you just have to have an IR or an institutional recommendation. So there they do kind of treat that, you guys, differently. They don't call it alternative, if you will, but it's either accredited or not. And they specify who the accrediting body can be. It's not a state agency in its particular case. Taking a look at North Dakota, yes, they do distinguish between ALT program and traditional program. If you come through a traditional program, then you can apply, and you just have to have a copy of a valid out-of-state license, for example. If you completed an alternative certification program in another state, you must hold a valid license in that state, and then you need to complete the North Dakota Praxis 1 and 2 exams. So they kind of have that, both the valid license and the testing in North Dakota. This is interesting. I just put this here because I found this interesting that they put that on there. They said, we encourage you, if you're coming from out of state, that you get your license in your own state first, so that you can go through that process and meet the requirements that way. Just thought that was interesting. Next one, South Dakota. Yes, South Dakota does separate the two. They do treat alt program and traditional programs differently, in that you must complete the program and have 3 years of teaching experience in the last 5 years. You must also have documentation of a valid license from that state and provide verification from a licensing state that there are no actions or ethics violations on your license. So in South Dakota, they have the experience, and you got to have a license, and the license can't have any action on it. Versus with the traditional route, you don't have to have years of experience, if you will, or hold a license from another state. Utah does not specify the difference. They just ask you to identify what it is, and then you have to show content knowledge in one of two ways, either through at least 1 year of teaching experience with a standard license, or passing a content test. So they kind of have a blend there. It can be one or the other. But they treat both alt and traditional the same way. In Wyoming, yes, they do treat them differently. And they have the stipulation there that you must be eligible for licensing in Wyoming, and 3 out of 6 years of teaching experience in the state where you were fully licensed. It's almost both of those. So I just thought I would just kind of take a moment, you guys, to just say, what do we see kind of happening around us? And then kind of take a look at our rule. And I think what's going to be important is for you all in your recommendation is to determine first and foremost, do you want to treat them the same? We saw out of this one, I think it's 3 out of 7, they treated them the same, and 4 out of 7 treated them differently and put some specifications on what was required for those 2 different pathways. So I'm going to hold there for a second before we pull up kind of the red line version of 410 and kind of dig into that, and wanted to see if you had any questions or any comments, any of your current thinking of what you're kind of wanting to see there as a task force. Sharon?
Thank you. I love the looks of this. And maybe it's because I didn't see, oh, maybe I don't have the link left over, but I would have studied this last week. Was this already somewhere in my Google Drive and I just missed that?
Sharon, no, I did it last night at midnight.
Oh,
sorry.
Oh, no.
I'll be frankly honest. I was like, you know what? I kind of have some research that my access on this. I'm just going to pull it into a chart because I thought, you know, at least kind of be that pre-lesson before I head into the full lesson, if you will, just to put some background knowledge. So you didn't miss anything.
I have, excuse me, I have shared the link to view it now. It should be working.
All right, Crystal, do you want to go ahead then and bring up for us the red line version of the 400s? So you guys, this is kind of what I tried to do. I went back to the current language and I removed out and then I kind of added in some of the things that we have already voted on, like the 60 professional development units. So this no longer has the mentorship in it. And then I added in E, you guys, the verified completion of the EFA, which was in there, and then the minimum passing score, that smorgasbord, if you will. I highlighted those yellow areas where that is part of the connection to definitions in 1057-102. So I just highlighted those. One other thing I did, you guys, this is just a draft. I just wanted to have something for us to work from that we can edit right here live and work around to say, yeah, this is what we want, what we don't want, how you want that to read. You will notice there also, you guys, that I did, sorry, this is on my screen, so I can't see. Okay, I did, because we had identified in the class 1 here and the 3 that you had to meet the requirements in the class 2 first. That's why those 2 right there are that way. Then I added that 60 professional development. I did put the word "and" here next to the bachelor's degree because it's like verification of these. So the bachelor's degree "and." And then you guys, I was just playing around with it to say, if you wanted to just treat them the same, then you would just do accredited this professional education program. You could recommend approved professional preparation program and supervised teaching experience, treat them the same, or you could choose to treat the alt and the traditional differently with some kind of stipulation on the alt. So then I kind of put that "or" in there to say maybe you wanted to look at that. You guys, original language, this is the original language of how it reads now. It's just ordered differently. But C had 5 years in it, and I put the 3 in because we voted a while back around bringing that down from 5 to 3. I also just highlighted these other definitions that I think are relevant to how these words are defined in 102, such as educator prep program, successful, and then down here on student teaching portfolio and grade point average, so that we make those connections to that. So I just kind of wanted to have something up here for you guys to manipulate, suggest how you want this to read. This certainly is a draft. But I wanted to have something here that you could make suggestions on what you would like to see in there. And Eric is going to do us a favor. And if you want to recommend something on there or have question or dialogue and then make the changes, we're more than happy to do it live right here as we're working on it. So I really kind of want to leave this stage there for you guys to kind of really engage in that conversation. I think it's important to talk about really that language right there with B to C. Jewel?
Okay, so in our conversations during the last meeting and me suggesting that we go to 1 year, is that off the table according to what you were saying, or is that something that I can still bring forward for a change?
Yep, Jewel, so if you, absolutely, that's still on the table. If you want to bring that forward as a change, then what I hear you saying is you would be then recommending to keep B for the traditional, C for the alt, but you would like to recommend to change the 3 years to a 1 year.
Yes, that is correct. And just for clarification too, so that we're all on the same page, because when we talk about 5 years and where that comes from, that is based on a 0.5 FTE. When I say 1 year, I am basing that on 1 FTE. So just for clarification as well. So 1 FTE as 1 year of success, well, 1 year of experience. So that is my
Yeah.
recommendation.
So Jewel, when you look at the definition in 1057-102, it's subsection 13, where it talks about a year of experience means, right? Employment as a licensed administrator at any level within a state accredited PK-12 system educational for the equivalent of at least 0.5 full-time employee FTE for a school year comparable to 180-day work years. So that's one of the definitions that's kind of referenced, if you will, when we say a year's experience. It's not a 1.0 for 180 days. A year's of experience is equivalent to 0.5 FTE for 180 days.
Correct. So we'd have to look at the definition.
Mike?
Well, so I was just looking, so if that's the definition, then Jewel, couldn't you just change it to 2 years? And that would fit the definition for 1 full year?
If that is, sorry, may I speak again?
Of course.
Mike, yes, what I think is interesting in all of this is I do not think the field, oftentimes when they're reading this, or when an applicant is looking at it, when it says that they need which was originally 5 years of experience, or 3 would be 1.5 years, that you look at it in those terms. So perhaps clarifying that 1 = 1 is much better. I guess that's a good conversation, because I don't, anyway.
This is Diane. I have a quick question. When we're talking about moving down to 1 year, does that mean 1 year teaching whether you were in an accredited professional educator program, preparation program, or any educator preparation program? So it doesn't need to be accredited?
Diane, that is for the alt program. The way this is written right now would be suggesting the years of experience for only folks that attend alternative preparation programs, not accredited traditional programs that are affiliated with a college or university. Sharon, go ahead.
Thank you. I think my question, it was first Diane's, but the second one, can we pop up, where is that definition being a half year at? And can anyone give us some background about why that? Well, I know that it snuck in there at one point for teachers who were maybe filling an empty position that occurred in the middle of a year. And I think, but I think there's a tie-in to maybe TRS, or, I mean, I don't know. Can somebody help me give any background on that half year thing, and then maybe pop up on the screen there where that definition is? Thank you.
Yeah, Sharon. So it is in, if we look at definitions in 1057-102, and maybe we can get someone to pull that up for us. The administrative year of experience is listed on 13. And then 14 is currently, it says year of teaching experience. This is how it reads, Sharon. It says year of teaching experience means employment as a licensed teacher at any level within a state accredited P-12 school system or in an educational institution specified in 20-9-707 MCA for the equivalent of at least 0.5 FTE for a school year comparable to a 180-day school year. Experience gained prior to initial licensure is not considered. And currently, kind of you guys, how this is applied is if you have a full-time position, a 1 point FTE, and you work for a full year, that's considered a year. If you work 0.5 FTE, that's considered a year. If you work 0.75 FTE, that's still considered a year. But you have to have at least 0.5 FTE in order for that year to be considered 1 year of experience. That's currently how that is applied. And I
Julie,
know
Mike-
sometimes, go ahead.
Sorry, Mike asked in the chat if we can make this work for TRS.
Sorry, that was totally being facetious. I'm sorry. I didn't mean someone to read that out loud.
I'm sorry, I didn't read the smiley face. I should have.
I appreciate that, Mike. I'm sure many of the teachers would appreciate that as well. That might not help our retention though. All right, so Tristan, if possible, could we, Crystal, I'm not sure which one of you guys are driving this machine today, but can we pull back up there to our red line version of 400? And then, so what are you guys thinking there? I guess the first question is, as a group, do you want to recommend that you treat traditional and alt the same, or do you want to treat them differently? And if you do want to treat them differently, do you want to treat them differently, kind of similar to the way that we already are, same, or kind of change it up? And I see that maybe Nick had a question, and then Diane. Nick, and then to Diane.
Nick, are you muted?
I sure am. Thanks, Jacob. I believe Jewel has a motion on the table, and I, at this point, would like to second that motion that we move subsection C from 3 to 5 years of successful teaching, given the definition of year of teaching experience from 10.57.102.
So Nick, can you clarify that motion one more time? Are you saying 3 years? Jewel,
No,
I hear.
I am seconding Jewel's motion.
Okay, Jewel, can you clarify the motion for us? And then, and Diane has her hand up too.
Okay.
Sorry, Nick.
It goes back to basically 1 year of teaching experience, and as stated before, it is someone who has a current standard, unrestricted, out-of-state educator license.
And 1 year experience. So that 3,
Yes.
those numbers are going to change to 1 that are there right now.
That is correct. So thank you, Nick. Yes, I needed to restate that.
Eric, I see your cursor there. Can you just write that in so we can see that in front of us?
Diane, over to you.
Thank you. So my question would be, I would certainly not be in favor of taking it down to 1 year. If that is the current unrestricted license would include an alternative program from a non-accredited school or educator preparation program, so that we're opening it up to anyone who has a license from a school that may not have been at all affiliated with an accredited program. So we're just, I think the quality suffers. And I know that we need teachers, but to give them movement into full licensure with, as we have it now, if 1 year is translated to 0.5 years in an accredited school, but it could be from an unaccredited educator preparation program. So I would be opposed as it stands now.
Okay. So I want to thank you, Diane. So Eric, can you change that language to what the motion is on the floor? And I heard Nick say that he seconded that motion. And I hear Diane saying that she's opposed to that. And so I guess that the motion that then is on the floor is, guys, that do we want to take a vote? It sounds like we need to take a vote on keeping a difference between accredited professional education program and alt program, and that adding on the alt program, the requirement of two things. You have to have a current standard unrestricted out-of-state educator license. That means no provisional, no emergency. It has to be a full license that can be renewed, basically. And then stipulation of years of experience. And so one thing I do want to want to stress this point, you guys, right, as you're going into this conversation, is that if you had 3 years of experience and you were in a classroom as a 1.0 FTE, that equates to 3 years of experience, not 6. So I want you to reverse that. If you are in a program at 0.5 FTE for 3 years, that still equates to 3 years of experience, okay? But if you are in a classroom for 0.25 of an FTE, you only maybe pick up a section of 2 classes or something, right? Or you only teach less than the full year. That means that you don't have 1 year of experience. Okay, that means you're going to be under 1 year of experience. So I just want you to be clear on that definition, that 5 does not equal 2.5 years of experience. You've got to have at least be in a classroom over 0.5 FTE of the time in order for that entire year to be equivalent to 1 year's of experience. It looks like we got some more discussion. Mike and then Sharon. Hopefully I'm seeing all your hands, guys.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. So we're talking about just C. Is that correct? Just C, where it says, so they've actually completed an educator preparation program. They have a standard unrestricted license. And then we are just talking about the years of successful teaching experience. I just want to make sure that I've got that straight in my head.
That is correct, Mike. And the motion on the floor is to change it from 3 to 1. Sharon?
Thank you. That clarified just a little bit, but Mike, that question, thank you, only about C, but there's another point I'd like to make here, I guess. And I hope that all on the task force are aware that once we moved into C, you'll notice that the words accredited are missing from C. That's because it's an alternative program, quite likely. We haven't yet and might not ever change the definition of a full year of teaching experience to be an actual full year instead of half. So the motion on the table actually is in keeping with the current definition, which is a half a year means is a year. But now one more thing, Julie, because you put that or at the end of B, no matter what happens here, does that or change how OPI does business, or is that you were doing business with an or in place anyway, right?
That is correct, Sharon.
Okay.
We have and are currently treating traditional differently than we are alt. Right now, it's 5 years experience for an alt, and it's not a requirement for an accredited preparation program to have any years of experience or an out-of-state license. Unrestricted current teaching license. Mm-hmm. All right, so it sounds like the motion's on the floor. Jacob, I think we should turn it over to you to maybe take a vote on that if we're good with that. Are you guys ready to move on that?
Sorry, this is Eric, just for housekeeping, and Nick just spoke about this. So really the only change on the table right now, which I have in the comment, is that the wording in 1057 410 3C changes to and 1 year of successful teaching experience. That's all that is being proposed right now in Jules' motion, correct?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, and then
That's
sorry,
my understanding.
sorry, I missed who seconded that.
Nick.
Nick.
Okay.
Okay, so a yes vote is to change it to 1, a no vote is not to change it. We don't have an alternative yet, right? So it's just vote yes to change it to 1 and to move forward with that, no to continue the discussion essentially. So I'm going to go down the order that I see people, and Sharon, you're at the top.
Oh, okay. No.
Mike.
Yes.
Diane.
No.
Erica. Okay, I want to highlight that Nick seconded, so he voted yes. Angela.
No.
Dan.
Yes.
McCall.
I'm gonna say no here today, but I am in sort of a weird position because SISBAC has already seen these and they did review it as 3. So that's the only reason I'm voting no here today, is because they did already see that as 3.
Val.
Yes.
Heather.
Yes.
Sue.
Yes.
Dean, are you back with us?
I am, and I vote no.
Okay. Tristan, when you get a chance, can you give us the tally?
Yes. I had that we had 13. So did we miss anyone?
I know John left for a meeting, he said.
Oh, okay. Okay. That would be it. So let's see. 5 no's. 7 yes.
So
Puts it at 58%.
not quite enough, huh? So I guess, Julie, our next step, you may have one in mind, but what is the alternative?
Well, I
anyone
mean,
have
it's
a
up to the
proposal for
task
discussion?
force if they want to put another motion on the table as to what it is. Because currently, you guys, it is 5 years. We voted, though, that we would look at it being 3 years a while ago. So that's why I have it at 3. So I don't know if you guys want to keep it at 3. I don't know if you want to go 5, you want to go 2. I think it's really up to you all. I'm just here to have fun with you all.
I would move to make it 3. This is Sharon.
This is Dean. I second that.
All right, let's Jewel, do you want to go ahead before we vote on the motion that's on the floor? Jewel, I'm sorry, you have your hand up, or you?
I was trying to beat Sharon to a motion, I guess. So.
Well, go ahead, because if we want to continue the discussion, because Erica has her hand up too. Maybe we.
I was going to go for 2. So anyway, I will let everyone else discuss.
Well, Erica, go ahead, and then I want Jewel and Sharon maybe to have some. Julie, I think we could have some discussion on this, because I also feel we probably end up voting about the same vote as we had before. I don't know that we have a consensus yet. Erica, go ahead.
So in my mind, I guess 2 and 1 don't make a big difference, but when you get to that 3rd year, I think the superintendent's fear is that that's the tenure year. So it's more likely that if somebody's working in a state, they get to that 3rd year and they get tenure, we're going to lose a chance to bring them into our state. Whereas 1 and 2 years, we have more of a chance to pull them our way. In my mind, that's kind of where that 2 and 3 year difference is.
Jewel, go ahead again.
Thank you. Yes, and I just need to reiterate, in looking at the tenure in a lot of different states, and especially California, they become tenured at the end of their second year. So again, I would like to consider that because they are an area that we draw teachers from. So thanks.
Sharon, I'm going to come back to you. I think you deserve a forum to make your case.
Well, I guess I think going from 5 to 3 is a huge concession in the first place. While it may or may not be true about the tenure situation and attracting teachers, my huge concern here is over that half year of experience in the definitions. So it's quite likely that we could get a teacher who has popped from district to district. If you just put 2 years in there, that's 2 different districts that they may not have kept. I mean, is that successful? I guess we're reliant on the form, the recommendation from the form and the school employer. But I think when you stick with 3 years, we have some quality assurance here. It should not be easy to get a license in the state of Montana.
So I have a few follow-up questions if I could and about this. And I don't know that we're saying it correctly, are we, Julie? It's not necessarily a half year of experience, it's a year of experience at half time. So if you just did a half a year at 0.5, you wouldn't qualify as that. That's not necessarily true. You would have had to do a full year as a half-time teacher. So that, I think there's some clarification there to make. So you couldn't necessarily, you could do a full year at 2 different schools. That's possible, right? And do half-time at each. That would still count, because that would be a full year. And I think that's what you're saying, Sharon, but it's not, you couldn't just do a half a year.
Exactly, but oh, sorry.
Yeah, so I mean, that's a clarification we have to make first. Go ahead, Sharon.
Sure. My point there is about the successful teaching experience, and that half time doesn't allow that full, highly qualified teacher to come to us.
Go ahead, Dan.
Yes, thanks. I think the 3 years is, it certainly isn't a deal killer. I mean, I'm certainly one that would go for 0. And those who live in the brown part of the state would probably like that as well. If you're coming from already, and this is just C, an approved, completed educator prep program from out of state, I have a hard time wrapping my head around why Montana should be a hard place to get a license. It just doesn't make sense. And especially when we're talking out here in the Eastern Plains. And I know Nick and Jewel and Dean have all had experience out in Eastern Montana. Now on the reservation, okay, and we see enough hardship anyway. And when we're trying to make things easier to bring people to our state to be teachers, we don't need barriers that have no bearing on their ability to be a qualified educator.
So Erica, you had your hand up next, and then Val, you'll go after Erica.
I'm going to go back to Sharon's comment. I think she made a good comment about being worried about teachers, being non-qualified and popping from district to district. But I think that if we leave it, 1 year, 5 year, 3 years, whatever years, that doesn't really show that they've been successful in one district unless we put that verbiage in there. But it's our responsibility as hiring, like superintendents when we hire, to look at their background and go, okay, where were you at? I think that's more of our responsibility. But I don't think the years we put in here, unless we actually explicitly say 3 years experience in one district, I don't think that's going to stop us from getting somebody to pop to place.
Val.
Sorry, I was talking muted.
So I totally agree with Erica and Dan, and I'm from Cascade, so not even the eastern part of Montana. I'm totally in agreement that local control would prevent that from happening. It doesn't experience, no matter how many years of experience you have, does not guarantee a qualified teacher. I would leave it in the hands of my superintendent to say, yeah, you have 10 years experience, but you still suck and we don't want you. Or, hey, you have 1 year of experience and I think we can fit you into us perfectly. And you might not be the best teacher, but we will make you the best teacher. So I'm all for leaving it in local control. I do not believe that Montana should be hard to get a license, just because, not saying that we're going to let bad teachers in, but years of experience does not guarantee a good teacher. Thank you.
All right, so gonna go to Mike in just a second, but I think for clarity's purposes, the conversation that we're having is this. So Sharon says her argument is that we need to have the 3 years in place to help vet the unsuccessful underqualified teacher from coming. We also need to take into consideration the flip side that the argument is being made, is that does the 3 years limit the qualified teacher who just hasn't taught for 3 years yet from coming? So that's the balance that we're talking about right now. Which one is the greater evil that we're trying to figure out? So Mike.
I was just going to say, I think I would probably play the odds that we probably have lost more opportunities to have teachers come in due to the number of years than we have had bad teachers end up in Montana if we didn't have that number of years. I'd be willing to play those odds, as I think the administrators in the eastern part of the state would as well. And as Val said, leave it up to local control. We can vet the teachers ourselves.
So Diane?
I've mentioned this before, but approved doesn't mean accredited. And so as we're talking about an approved program, as I understand it, and I just want to be sure that I'm understanding correctly, it means approved by another state or a state agency. So it isn't that we know someone's coming in with that they've gone through student teaching and they've gone through all the requirements of an accredited program. It means they've come in from another state where that program was approved, not necessarily accredited. Can someone clarify that for me?
So this is Julie. Yeah, so I really want to clarify that point, Diane. Accredited and approved do not mean the same thing. And so there are both accredited professional education programs that are affiliated with colleges and universities that are both accredited and or approved by a state agency. Alternative preparation programs, which we refer to as it doesn't have accredited in front of it there in C, that's the difference between the two, is are not accredited, they're approved. But I really want to be careful on the words there, because even like it's approved programs, right? So the approved program leads to licensure in a state. Accredited means you reach a particular professional level of standard and can also be approved. So I don't want to say that traditional are only accredited. Traditional can also be accredited or approved, versus an alt program is approved by a state that leads to licensure in that state. And that second piece there is critical, because you have to have a current standard unrestricted out-of-state educator license. So that means you've not only completed that approved program led to full licensure in that state.
Go ahead, Sharon.
I hope that helps.
Sorry, I kept my hand up, but yeah, right, Julie clarified. Let's remember again that we're on those alternative programs and not back on A or B, we're on C. And again, I'll reiterate my concern. I am from Eastern Montana. I'm not a superintendent in Eastern Montana, but I taught for 25 years in Eastern Montana. And I've watched alternative licensed teachers need quite a lot of help. And of course, we did that here in my little school. I think in our smallest schools that perhaps are trying to recruit in this way, you need a lot of support and mentoring for teachers that might not go through a fully accredited professional educator preparation program. And I know that that's local control, but I also know that sometimes you don't have the staff to provide the necessary support for those teachers. In fact, most of the time in our small schools, we don't. There's one math teacher, there's one science teacher, and your superintendent is over-assigned, quite honestly. And we do hire people. Yes, it's local control, and it gets down to there's one applicant for this position. So we're relying on our standards, our rules to help vet them properly first. Thank you.
Go ahead, Val.
So I guess I'm to Sharon, I guess, and not to be disrespectful at all. So your statement kind of made me feel, and I've just been on a board for 23 years. So I'm not a superintendent, but I do teach. But I kind of took that negatively against a superintendent or principal or hiring committee's responsibilities. It just kind of made it sound like if you're a small school and you don't have enough people to vet your hiring, that you're going to do a bad job at hiring. And I'm having a hard time getting past that. And I don't know what you could say that would make me feel differently. And totally no disrespect at all.
So Val, this is Julie. I think that you're bringing up like what's important, like both you and Sharon and Val, and I've heard it, maybe it was Mike just a minute ago, which is there's a difference between being certified and getting a job, right? Getting a license in the state of Montana does not guarantee you a job, right? It only guarantees you to get into a pool to be eligible to potentially teach here. So I just want to, what we're talking about here is getting a license. We're not talking about necessarily quality, like what does that mean to actually get the job? That's more on the local control. That's not basically what we're looking at here, just to clarify that. Crystal, I saw you had your hand up.
Thank you. And I think it's a perfect segue. Just as it is so in my wheelhouse right now, I think it's a great opportunity to bring up emergency authorizations, and that I have them due tomorrow and just got another stack, and I'm going to hit over 200 for this school year. And as we talk through this, I know it isn't necessarily part of this conversation, but it truly should be, because what we're saying is districts are having to put emergency authorizations in, and who, their credentials should matter to a point, but let's be honest, it's not a certified teacher. And yet we're trying to say that a certified teacher needs to have X, Y, and Z years to get a license in Montana. So this is going to continue to be a trend, and it's only going up. Julie, I don't know how many, if you can remember, you did last year.
Yeah, last year we had 121 or 2, so we're at 200 this year.
It's got, we're not there yet. I think I have like 170 something, and I got a stack today. So I think we'll hit 200. Yeah. So just food for thought to really think about.
Okay,
May I call for the question?
Go ahead, Sharon. Sharon, go ahead.
I'm sorry, maybe other people wanted to comment. I'm sorry, I can't see whether people's hands are raised. My bad. I was just going to call for the vote.
Angela did have her hand up, so we'll let Angela speak, and then we'll move on the vote for 3.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I appreciate Crystal's comments, and I know that we've been talking about the rise that you're seeing there at the office, and applications for emergency authorization. And I guess I think that we would be remiss if we just said that it is because of the high licensure standards that we're seeing an increase. And then to point to an earlier part of the conversation about whether it should be difficult or not. I think what can't get lost in that conversation is that high standards to teach Montana students should not necessarily be equivocated with making licensure difficult. And I think that that's really how we need to make sure that we frame this conversation is making sure that we have high standards for those who would teach Montana students. And if that seems difficult for some, I would make no apologies. And so I think that we really need to make sure that we frame that appropriately. And I think that that's what folks are intending to do with every piece that we add to this conversation. Thanks.
Okay, so it sounds like we've got a ready for a motion to come on the table, which I think is good because we got some other ones we got to look at, you guys.
Yeah, so Eric, if you have this captured, we had a motion from Sharon to move to 3 years. And I think that was seconded by Mike. Is that right?
Seconded by Dan.
By Dan. Dan? I don't think Dan seconded it.
By Dean
Oh,
Jardy.
Dean, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes, Dean.
Okay, so going as I can see you, Angela, you happen to be at the top. Yes, yes is a vote for 3 years. No is a vote for not. So Angela?
I would support 3 years.
All right, documenting that Sharon made the motion, Dean seconded it. Jewel?
No.
Erica?
Sorry, I have to go no.
Nick? Nick, we couldn't hear you.
No.
Mike? Mike?
Yeah, so this is to go from 5 to 3.
Correct.
Yes.
Sean?
Now, do you want me to vote because I just stepped in?
You can abstain.
Because I haven't been part of the conversation, let me abstain on this one only. Will that be acceptable?
That's acceptable to me, yes.
Okay, I abstain then.
Dan?
No.
Diane?
Yes.
McCall, do you wish to vote?
Yes.
Yes, you vote yes.
Correct.
Val?
No.
Sue?
No.
And Dean seconded it, so he was a yes vote. Tristan?
Counting.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
We have 6 yeses. I'm sorry. And 6 no's.
All right,
Doesn't
equally
seem-
split.
I'm sorry. Let me do it one more time.
No, that's what I have, Tristan.
Oh,
I
okay,
have
good.
6 yes and 6 no.
I got split on 2 different pages, so it was hard to.
Yeah, that should be the correct 12. Okay, well, Julie, is it in the best?
So I don't know, guys, you want to put a motion for 2? We're gonna leave it at 5. Where are we? So it's a no on 1, a no on 3. Jewel, Nick?
I would make a motion that we look at 2 years of experience.
Second that.
Who seconded that?
Sean.
Sean seconded that. Nick, you have your hand up?
I was just gonna second.
Okay, well, while I've got you, Nick, you can go ahead and vote, yes or no on 2 years.
I vote for 2 years of successful teaching experience.
Okay, voting on 2 years of successful experience for C, yes is a vote in favor of 2 years. Erica?
Yes.
Sharon?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Dean?
Yes.
Diane?
No.
McCall,
I'm gonna be a no again because the specs saw 3. Thanks.
Val,
Yes.
Sue,
Yes.
Angela,
No.
I think that's everybody.
I-
Did I miss someone? Dan?
Well, yeah, I'm gonna say no.
No to 2 years, Dan?
Correct.
Is Sean, are you abstaining again or are you voting this time?
Sean seconded it, Tristan.
Yeah, right, correct.
Okay.
And
Did I
then
get
Nick,
everybody
did
there?
you second that?
Nick voted first and said yes.
Okay, so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 to 4. Is that correct, Tristan? 9 to 4?
I just have 8 to 4.
Who-
I believe we have 12 currently here.
I've got
No.
9 to 4.
Yeah, it's 9 to 4. I've got no is Diane, McCall, Angela, and Dan. And yes is Erica, Sharon, Mike, Dean, Val, Sue, Jewel, Sean, and Nick. Did I write somebody twice? No,
That
I got
should be
9 to 4.
We should have
Okay.
13 participants. That should be great. Okay, well, 2 does pass. It's 60% then of our supermajority.
And sorry, just for housekeeping, so who made the original motion?
Jewel made the original motion. Sean
Okay.
seconded it.
Okay, and our pass percentage, so we had 9 out of 12.
Out of 13.
9 out of 13, okay.
Okay, guys, I'm gonna leave these highlighted here, just right now, just to remind you that we're gonna have to jump over to chapter 100, subchapter 100 for definitions in a minute here. But I want to take a look at 424 of what that looked like once we remove the mentorship from that. So you could see what that looks like. That is for the class 5 provisional license. So you guys, I had left this draft in the form of 3 types. We already have 2. We just don't distinguish between right now currently in rule between 5B and 5C, which I'll explain here for a minute. Okay, so 5A is for someone who meets all the requirements for licensure except for does not have one of those competencies, the GPA, the portfolio, or the praxis exam. Currently, that is valid for 1 year. We had changed that to 2 years when we were talking about mentorship because we wanted to give them more time for the mentorship component to complete if they didn't complete that, and only give them 2 years versus the test is 1. So I just highlighted this here. I didn't know if you wanted to leave it the way that it currently is, which is right now, it's 1. Then the 5B is the traditional. That's for somebody on a class 5 who has a bachelor's degree from a regionally accredited college, but has not completed a teacher preparation program and needs to attend an accredited preparation program. I highlighted that term again because that's showing up there in our definitions. So that would be the same as the way that we treat it now. The 5C, I kept that kind of pulled out, you guys, if we could scroll up there, you all. Because I do think this is different than somebody who needs to complete their teacher credentials. The C is valid for 3 years, non-renewable. This is for somebody who's seeking license in Montana, who's already done a program, but their license has expired. And they don't have recency and they need to get the 60 professional development units. So I kind of left that to distinguish between, if you will, somebody different from a 5B. And that's kind of how it looks. So that's what it looks like now without the mentorship in there. And then with that mentorship cooling out, I put the year back from 2 to 1 on the 5A. So up for discussion, Dan?
Yeah, so does the 5C apply to those, say with an international degree? Would that be would that be allowable? That they would get a 5C if they have a bachelor's degree from an international university? And they apply for a license in Montana, and they still have to, okay, now you gotta get the 60 units, or, you know. that's
They
what they would
don't
get?
have, if their license is expired, if they had a license that was expired, Dan, and they do not have current credits within the last 5 years, or current professional development in the last 5 years, then they would get a 5C.
Right, but I'm just talking, so I come in on a J1 visa. To me, this looks like the pathway for that to happen. That, you know, I have a teaching license from a different country. And I just need to come in. If I don't have a license, is this going to get me there? Or are we just going to go play that 5A game again?
So Dan, where that gets really tricky, right, is that I think we're going to be better off now with this in here, because this is 60 professional development units within the last 5 years, not 6 semester credits. So sometimes we get an international candidate who comes in, say, their transcript gets reviewed, they've completed an accredited preparation program, but their license, they don't have a current license, and they don't have credits in the last 10 years. Then this would apply to them, but they could use now, there's more options. They wouldn't have to just get 6 semester credits. They could use professional development units as well,
Right.
that were similar to renewal units. So
Okay,
they
but
could
that's
come
where
in
that would
on
fall.
this, and then they would get that potentially from the school district if you were all offering professional development units, for example.
Great, but that's where that would fall then.
Yep.
In this 5C. Perfect, thank you.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. Okay, any other comments about what this is looking like for us for 424 without the mentorship? Can we scroll back up to that 1 year? Do you guys want to leave that as it currently sits now that we don't have the mentorship in there, they get 1 year to take the praxis? Yes? Okay. All right, do we need to take a motion on this, or this is kind of how we're recommending it now without without the mentorship? Sean?
Yeah, I just, a question around Dan's question around the international piece. Who's now continental US, even North American, Canadian and US probably have similar systems, but they're quite dissimilar systems, or quite different systems internationally, depending upon where you're from. Who's making that call? Who's going to make that call? You folks are going to make that call to say that they can get a 5C if they're Bulgarian with a teaching degree, and what does that teaching degree look like?
So Sean, there's already a process. Yeah, there's already a process in place where they have to actually get their transcripts evaluated by an outside entity. And there's only particular entities that are kind of approved, if you will, that we utilize for that process. So an outside entity, and they actually have to pay for that to get done. The candidate has to pay for that evaluation from a legit entity, if you will, to do that, to provide that information to us.
Okay, perfect. And that's a neutral entity of some kind.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay,
sir.
great. Perfect. Thank you.
All right, are we good here on 424? Any more needed discussion? Do we need to take a vote, or what are we thinking? You guys are quiet. That's because you're getting ready for a really good conversation.
Is anybody? We should just ask. Is
Okay,
anybody?
guys. All right.
Is
All
anybody
right.
opposed? Anybody opposed? What's on the screen?
May I just ask, I mean, like with the 5A, so what happens if we run into another pandemic and things kind of get all wonky, or, you know, licensure at OPI has to close shop for 3 months and they can't issue provision 5As. The whole non-renewable, what are the conditions that make it a renewable process?
I think, Dan, it's a really good point. And I'm just thankful for our Board of Public Ed. We have taken these circumstances to them to say what has been the impact of COVID-19 for them to really make that decision as the, governing body, if you will. And they did grant extensions on that due to so much happening with our folks not being able to even renew licenses, if you will, or have additional time. So I think that we're just going to continue to, work through. And if we have those unique global pandemics or situations that we're faced with, then I think we go to the board to, present what that information is for them to make that ultimate decision based upon the recommendation from the superintendent.
All right, thank you.
You bet. All right, how about some endorsements? So Crystal, can you put up a quick, you guys, I did another quick analysis of the same states since I was on their websites on taking a look at, do other states have multiple pathways to add endorsements to a current license? So adding an additional endorsement in multiple pathways or only through a traditional completion of an educator preparation program. So this is what I found out. So Alaska, yes, they do allow you to add an additional endorsement to your license through 4 different ways. One is the traditional way, which is an endorsement program where you have to attend that, accredited program, the alternative program, and you have to have a university recommendation. They do stipulate, though, that this method is the only method in which you can add an additional endorsement for a different grade level than what your current license is. So in the state of Alaska, if you have an elementary endorsement, you can add a secondary endorsement only via this route, which is to attend a preparation program and complete that preparation program for that endorsement. You can't use another route to do that, to add a grade level in which your license is not currently in. They also have a second method, which is a degree, a major or a minor, where you've added a doctorate degree, a master's degree, or 18 semester areas in an endorsement area. Can you scroll up there, Crystal, for me? And they do stipulate, though, that there are some endorsement areas that this is not available for. So you can't use this for elementary, you can't use this for reading, you can't use this as English as a foreign language or for special education. So they stipulate that that method can only be used for certain types of endorsements, but not this one. And then they have a content area knowledge exam plus teaching experience. You could get an additional endorsement in not in those areas highlighted there if you have 2 years of teaching experience and you pass a score. And then they add a 4th one for CTE. If you have 2 years of teaching experience in CTE, 6 semester hours of coursework for classroom management, student assessment, or CTE specific teaching strategies, and successful completion of an approved CTE content specific. So Alaska does allow you to add an endorsement onto your current license, but there's some stipulations in the pathways that you can do that applies for. Next state, Colorado. Yes, again, very similar to Alaska, you guys. They allow it for some grades and some K-12 endorsements, but not for all. So you'll notice here it's only for secondary. For 7 through 12, you can get an endorsement via completion of an educator prep program or completion of 20 semester hours of college coursework or passing of a praxis exam. But again, they stipulate in Colorado, it does not broadly apply to all endorsements. If you want to add one in elementary, there's certain things you have to do. In Idaho, they kind of stipulate it kind of like an emergency authorization, if you will. They say, okay, yes, but you have to have a current Idaho license. And the purpose of this alternative authorization is to allow school districts to request that certification when they cannot fill it with someone with the correct endorsement or certification. It's kind of treated, it looks like how we do internships here, where you can have it for a year. You got to show satisfactory completion and progress towards that, and it can be renewed up for 2 additional years for a total of 3 years. Then they kind of have that pathway there. You can do the traditional EPP program. You can get it through obtaining your national board endorsement. You can get it through a master's degree in that content area, or you can do it through a content area assessment and a mentorship. So kind of different than Alaska, which was the test and 2 years teaching experience. This is in an approved mentorship program, which looks like it's through that alternative, almost emergency authorization to do that. North Dakota is yes. North Dakota, you can add an endorsement in certain areas via praxis assessment, if you will, testing. In South Dakota, yes, you can. Again, you guys, they have in South Dakota specific areas of where you can add an endorsement through taking a test and having years of experience, but they also have it where you can't get it across the board and everything. So they have a lot of charts and requirements for different kinds of endorsements that kind of stipulate that, like we saw up above at Colorado and at Alaska. They do stipulate that it doesn't apply across all. They also put in here a little bit about special education, which says, you know, if you have a categorical special education endorsement, for example, a special education endorsement in autism, you can pass the content test for special education K-12 and get your K-12 special education generalist endorsement, but not vice versa, which is if you have a generalist, you can't get the categorical. But if you have a K-8 special education endorsement, you must have a minimum of 1 year teaching experience as a secondary and pass the pedagogy to get the generalist K-12. They also add in here just kind of a little bit about, you know, requirements for out of state with those additional endorsements. Utah, yes, you can. This is based on competency. They have a new competency-based endorsement that's kind of using knowledge of skills and disposition with coursework, micro-credentials, exams. So it's kind of like showing and demonstrating that competency in multiple ways. Keep going. So they have like a list of how you can show that competency, and they kind of go through that. And Wyoming is a yes. And that is kind of similar to what we saw up above for Alaska. Wyoming does not allow you to do it solely by an assessment. You've got to have additional things to go with it. So when you look here, go down a little bit, you have to take the praxis and you have to have, let me see here, praxis exam. You have to have a standard license in Wyoming to do it. And you have to have practicum hours and you have to have supervision for that. And then you can see this list here, you guys, of requirements. Like you have to have so many semester credits in that endorsement, 27 credits, 9 of which can be in coursework. No more than 3 can be in pedagogy. You have to have a C. So what I wanted to share with you is in all, one other thing I did like on Wyoming. I liked this part here. They said can't be added for, you can't add a competency endorsement for elementary education, school administrator, district superintendent, school principal, program director, related services such as school psych counselor, social work, speech path, and school nurse, and categorical special ed. So they specify also in Wyoming that there are areas where that you cannot add an endorsement. So what I wanted to share with you guys is that many of the states, all the ones that surround us that I took a look at, do have ways that you can add another endorsement to your license, but they kind of stipulate, if you will, in which of the areas. So I've kind of taken the red line version for 301. So I'm going to pull that up. I know I went through that fast, but I really want to give you guys the floor in the conversation.
Giving you a time
So
check
I've-
too, Julie. It's 3 o'clock, just to check in.
4 o'clock our time, Jacob,
Yeah, 4
but
o'clock,
hey,
yeah.
thanks.
3 o'clock,
We
3
can
o'clock
make
is
that 3.
Yes, no, it's 4, so we have 30 minutes.
Thank you, Jacob. So if we could go to the red line version of the 300s, please.
Julie, that might take me a minute. I don't know as if you shared that with me, but let me look. Give me 1 second.
I got it.
Why should we just first initially vote on yes and no? As
I think, I don't know about that. Let me see here.
Well, there's no
Okay.
conversation if people don't want to add it.
Let's see. Let me, I can share my screen. Can you guys see that? Okay, you guys. So this is me trying to just put it here. This was originally kind of a draft that we had done, and then it didn't pass. So I just kind of left it there, if you will, and didn't really pursue it because it really didn't meet consensus. So that's what we had originally had. And so I kind of just didn't really come back to it. And of course I got caught on, they didn't have an or in there. I was like, oh my gosh, that's because I haven't even looked at this because it didn't pass. But anyhow, I did kind of go in, you guys, and say, okay, what would it look like if you did kind of an Alaska model with Montana language, with the 4 different pathways of completing the endorsement program, and maybe looking at not adding that's the only way you can add grade levels. And that maybe there's some areas that we would say you can't do this through this another pathway of getting a major or a minor or post degree. That we could look at content knowledge and teaching experience evidence, but maybe not in all. And then CTE. And I just kind of put Montana's verbiage in here, right? Of how we kind of look at CTE and what is required for professional development units or possibilities there. So I kind of put that in there, you guys. So I can come back to this, but there's kind of using Alaska model with Montana language, Montana specific language here. Here's kind of Idaho's, right? Adding that as well. What's different between the Alaska one and the Idaho one is there's no CTE on the Idaho one. And the program was the master's degree or the national board, which kind of mirrors our professional standard 1. South Dakota, I put, what would it mean if you wanted to stipulate something for special education? Wyoming, I put down language of what would it mean if we wanted to say this can't be added for certain areas. What would those be? And if you didn't have, experience at certain grade levels and you wanted to look at that, I had it there. So I just kind of typed up some what possibilities it could be of what you want to look at. Wanted to provide you with some information of what's happening in places around us when it comes to adding endorsements. It's all yours. Time for some good discussion. Thoughts, questions? What are we thinking? Do we want to add another pathway to add an endorsement or not? I think that was Crystal's first question. I can't see who's got their hand up here.
I think Sean was first.
Okay, Sean?
Yeah, the question around this, just not just in considering the endorsement, I think the main thing that I would ask to begin with is how much, because it says the only endorsements on Montana teaching are Montana teaching, administrative, or specialist licenses, or those approved by the Board of Public Education. Now within this conversation, is there, first question, is there a need to do this? And if so, how big of a need is it? And then as an extension of that conversation, you know, what kind of solution might be recommended, or might you folks who work with this recommend that would provide for quality but still minimize barriers to entry? So that's kind of a 2 or 3 pack of question, I think.
So Sean, I'll answer just a portion of it and then turn it over to the team to kind of, you know, maybe add to the conversation of what they think about, is it necessary or not. So I just want to say currently, the only way you can add an endorsement to your current license in Montana is to go back to school and complete an education preparation program to do that. So for example, if you're a high school math teacher and you want to add an endorsement in computer science, I'm picking on you, you'd have to go back to college to get your computer science endorsement. That's currently how it works. And I will let the group kind of respond to what they feel, Sean, on that other stuff. And we also have Sharon's hand up and Diane. How about Sharon?
Thank you, Julie. I think I remember from our last conversation that McCall had said CISPAC was interested in pathways to other endorsements. And I guess I would defer maybe, or ask McCall if any of these other models you think were part of a CISPAC discussion before. I haven't had a chance to look at those, and maybe you haven't either, but could you provide some clarity there?
Yeah, thanks, Sharon. CISPAC definitely was interested in talking about alternative pathways to endorsements. I think they really liked what they saw. I don't think I'm not sure of how that turned out because of the and/or discussion, but they weren't presented with any other alternative models. So they didn't have feedback on what that would look like.
Diane?
Thanks. One thing that we've talked about, and I'd like to hear from others a little bit, is the difficulty in getting the broad field endorsement. And we had discussions in our office that sometimes it is a challenge, and we know that in our smaller schools, there is a necessity to have someone who is a bit more of a generalist. So we wondered, and we'll go back to that praxis, if we were able to get a praxis score and a recommendation for those that don't have that bachelor's degree in a subject. Now that puts it back on the EPP programs a bit, but it does allow a little more flexibility in there. So I just would like to hear maybe from McCall and from other administrators, if that would be helpful, and board members, to give folks more of an opportunity to expand what they can teach.
Erica, you have your hand up. Did we lose Erica, you guys?
No, you didn't lose me. I'm sorry. I lost my mouse and I couldn't find it. I'm sorry. I just want to say that thank you, Diane. I think you put that very well. Broadfield science is one that we struggle with. We haven't had a business teacher in our school for many, well, no, we did have one and she was licensed, but it wasn't a good situation. But neighboring schools that don't have business teachers for this, we do have a math teacher who is very, very good with technology, and we have found ways that he's been able to provide some technology. I think I have teachers, if we could do it, who could provide some other business classes like Word or accounting and things like that. But I think Diane she's right. It would be nice to have some kind of pathway that they could prove for proficiency without going back and taking the whole college course.
We have two raised hands, Jewel and then Diane.
Thanks.
I do agree that we need to have a pathway. It just makes it difficult to have this in front of us and to make a decision just on the spot as to which would be the most beneficial to keeping the quality and still providing opportunities for our kids through teacher licensure. So that's where I am. But I do think that we really need, like McCall said and Diane, to look at one of these.
Diane, then Dan.
Yes, and I didn't remove the EPPs necessarily, but left a little more flexibility with them to make a recommendation if there were, for instance, a past praxis or some type of, other ways to demonstrate competency. So, but that's just our thought.
Dan?
Yeah, mine is just basically solely around praxis. If it's going to be a part of a choice, then make it the choice. I mean, maybe the score is 10% or maybe 10% above. I don't know what the qualifying current score is for someone who doesn't, have it, or 10 points, whatever it might be. It's 153 for a general, then maybe it's, 163 or something. I don't remember what the actual scale is for the praxis, but, I mean, if we have a test and we say it's a content test, then let's just make it the content test. We're going to find out through that content test if they have the chops to have the endorsement. And I don't see any reason why you'd need to go any further with it if they can pass the praxis at an adapted level.
Okay. I see that Sharon, I think you had your hand up. I don't have all you guys on my screen. Was it
Right.
Sharon? Sharon,
Yeah. Thank you. And I think my question might be more for Angela. I don't know if John is still with us, but and Angela, I know you're going to be speaking out of turn because you probably don't want to speak on behalf of an entire organization, but can we talk about that? And again, you all know that my preference, if we must do this, is to put the and in there and not the or. But currently, higher ed doesn't have this pathway, I don't think, in place to be able to figure out this, what happens when somebody submits that to you, and then the MUS is left with the recommendation. Can you tell me, Angela, what that might mean for you?
Well, I guess, in the scenario that you just mentioned, and I think John voiced it at maybe a couple of meetings ago. I mean, I think it puts us in an unusual spot. I can speak and tell you that after having reached out to folks from our EPPs, there is, like you indicate, Sharon, a desire to see the and in there and to not have the standalone praxis as the opportunity for the endorsement. So, I mean, it's something that if it stays, we'll figure it out, but ideally, I think we'd like to see the praxis and the other pieces. So that's what I can give you.
So really, you guys, that would be, the change would be that the endorsement, you'd have to complete, if an and is in there, then that's really the same thing, but it's now adding on the praxis exam as well as a requirement for that, which you guys already do in your EPP programs. But it would be adding on to what we already have. Because right now you have to have the recommendation from the endorsement from the appropriate official for an accredited preparation program. That's B. Verifying that you completed it. So I guess my question is, you guys, because I know we're on the clock here.
Yeah.
Do we want to, does the task force want to recommend a pathway for the superintendent to consider for adding an endorsement? Or do you want to leave it as it is with it, which is you got to complete a program? knowing you guys, like I showed you with other states, they have multiple pathways. It's just that they stipulate in those pathways for what, you know, who can, if you will, not among grade levels or not particular pieces, which we tried here to say, you know, secondary only, which meant you couldn't change grade level. But that doesn't address the elementary, and class 1 and 2 teaching licenses, which didn't have the administrator, if you will, or the specialist in there. So I guess that's the question on the floor. Do you want to consider having a multiple pathway in here and recommending that or not?
Nick, I know you had your hand up first.
Thank you, Tristan. I would at this point like to make a motion that we approve the first draft as presented.
Okay, we have a motion by Nick to approve the first draft, which is everything above the like Alaska model. Is there a second?
This is Dan, and I will second that motion.
Dan seconds that. Then I think we're ready to go ahead and vote on that then. It'll be a yes vote in favor of that. No is not in favor. Sean, you were at the top of my list. Are you ready to vote?
I think so, but I'd like to ask a clarifying question initially. So we're just looking at the first draft and with the or as listed, without the consideration of any other models. Is that correct?
Yes, in this vote, yes.
In this vote.
Yep, it is a yes says we're going to adopt that first draft as is. No says no, we're not. There's no secondary consideration at this point.
At this point, okay, all right. So I guess we can always come back to a secondary consideration, but yes, at this point, yes, I vote yes.
Yes. Dan seconded, so he's a yes vote. Val.
Yes.
Nick made the motion, so he's a yes. Erica.
Yes.
Angela.
No.
Dean.
Oh, I'm gonna go with the no. I'm just not prepared.
Mike.
Yes.
Sharon.
No.
Jewel.
Yes.
Diane.
No.
McCall.
No.
Sue.
Yes.
Did I miss anyone who did not get the vote?
One moment, we have John and the attendees. Let me move him over. John, you can abstain if you'd like.
John, have you been able to join us? Were you able to hear, and do you wish to vote?
In all honesty, I just heard the vote.
Okay. I'm interpreting it as John is abstaining then. What is our count, Tristan?
Six yeses.
I have 8 yeses.
Oh, counting is hard today, guys. I'm sorry.
I have 8 yeses and 5 nos. I have Angela, Dean, Sharon, Diane, and McCall as no. So that gives us 8 out of 13, which is 61%, to recommend the first draft. John, you have your hand up.
Yeah. So being able to read this, I've been consistent on this when we've talked about in the past. I would vote no as well, if I were allowed to vote.
Okay, so that puts us at 8 out of 14, which puts us at 57%.
Yeah.
So,
And Sean also expressed some apprehension with his vote. Julie, I would like to ask a question, and for the sake of time, is it something that we could possibly do to ask the task force if they would like to put forth a recommendation without specifics, but that the superintendent and other parties, and I'm unsure if it's CISPAC would be involved, but that those parties moving forward consider an alternative pathway in their recommendation. So essentially, that the task force recommends that that this be taken into consideration, but not have the specifics attached to it.
yeah, I think if they said within their recommendation what they'd like to specify. So we recommend that you consider an, a multiple pathway, but are there any stipulations that you would like to see in there? Sharon?
Yeah, I think at this point, the task force motion, this is the second time that we've actually talked about this, and we're clearly at a draw here. But I think that McCall has indicated that CISPAC was interested in that. And Julie, I am certain that CISPAC would really appreciate seeing all these alternative models in front of them, that before perhaps they just didn't have, language that belonged with alternative pathways. So I'm not sure that it takes a vote from this group to be able to do that. I doubt that. I just think that our consistently not being decided here is a pretty good message, and that CISPAC, now that you did all that work, has some language to actually look at themselves. Thank you.
Yeah, I certainly, this language will go to the superintendent, and then the superintendent's going to bring forward her recommendation to CISPAC, right? So I think that's what I just want to be sure of, Sharon. Then that means that based upon the vote, you guys are recommending no way to add an additional endorsement. That's what I hear you saying, that we're going to keep it the way that it is. The task force is recommending to the superintendent not to have another multiple pathway. Is that correct?
Hi, sorry, this is Val. I did not take it that way, Julie. I took it more like they just didn't want the wording in the first draft.
Right, Val, and I think that's what Jacob was trying to clarify. He said, hey, maybe it's not this language in general, but does the task force want to recommend to the superintendent some form of a pathway, was what he had alluded to.
So could we put that forth for a vote as far as, do we want to put multiple pathways through? I think that would be a better question.
I'm sorry if
Go
I
ahead,
may.
Sharon, yeah, go ahead.
But we've spent quite a lot of time here, though, kind of fiddling with ands and ors and 3s and 5s and 1s and 2s. So I think putting forth an open-ended recommendation isn't exactly what this task force is going for. But I think we're obviously resolved, and maybe if we had another, another meeting, we could take a chance to look at all those other models. But I don't think this task force has had enough time to look at those. And I honestly am not comfortable leaving it open-ended. That's not what she asked us to do, is to make open-ended recommendations, I guess.
McCall.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to maybe offer that I do agree with Val that, my no vote isn't necessarily against alternate pathways. It's more around the language that's in front of us in the first draft. So I do want to make that clarification for myself. I do think, based on the presentation that we got from CISPAC the first time, is that we did get a lot of feedback from them that an alternate pathway for these endorsements is a good thing. So I think that, if you all would have agree that there may be an opportunity to have CISBAC do this in tandem with the superintendent. I don't know if that's appropriate, but I think that certainly they would be willing to kind of help tease this out during that meeting. When the superintendent provides her recommendations. Again, I don't know if that's appropriate. It's totally up to the superintendent to decide what those look like. But I do think that, you know, there is at least a want from folks on this task force to see alternate pathways move forward.
So I think that was my recommendation, was can this task force recommend that CISBAC and superintendent work on it together moving forward, knowing that they want all pathways to not have the language. Sean.
No, I just want to echo that same thing. I think we want to see multiple, at least I do, see multiple or alternative pathways. But in my mind, it was just the language specifically that I wasn't so sure about. And we haven't had an opportunity to really dive into those alternative, those other states' models to really see what's there. You know, and without having that knowledge, I feel really hesitant to be. I don't feel hesitant to say that we want to see an alternate path, or at least myself, but I would be hard pressed and hesitant to say what that path looks like. I think that's fair to say.
I have a question for McCall. Sorry to be jumping in there. May I speak?
Yeah,
of course, Diane.
This is Val, McCall.
Oh, I'm sorry, Val.
Yeah, that's right. So would CISBAC be okay with us coming or saying, no, we want to leave it as it is? And knowing that's where I'm struggling with it. If they themselves want a pathway and we say our recommendation is to leave it as it is, that's very conflicting for me.
Yeah, and I think that Val, what even gets even a little bit more conflicting, and I don't, you know, what McCall was saying too, is this is going to the superintendent as the task force recommendations to her, and then she's taking her recommendations to CISBAC.
So if we said to the superintendent, hey, we're kind of all in agreement that we want multiple paths, we just don't know what that looks like. Mm-hmm. Is that an option?
Right. Then we say to her, yeah, we want you to look at doing multiple pathways. This is what we'd like you to take a look at. And then that'll be put into her recommendation that goes to CISBAC. Then it's not saying that you agree to this particular language, if you will, but rather you want there to be a recommendation for that, to consider something. I'm sorry, Jewel and Diana. Diane, I don't know if your hand is new up or.
I'll be real fast. I agree that I have faith that CISBAC, and the superintendent, as they review the information, we didn't agree on something specific, but certainly open to the idea of alternative pathways without time to specifically decide which one would be best for Montana. And so the other thing is, I agree with Jewel. We need to do another motion before we adjourn.
Jewel, did you want to make a motion?
Yes, and I apologize. I just want to make sure because it is 4:29. So I make a motion for 10:57-601 that we end at from a local school district board of trustees, period. And we remove the or from any other credible source. That was on the agenda. So that is my motion.
I second.
I would have sworn we already did that. Let's vote on it then. We have a second. Diane.
I second.
Yes.
Crystal, can you pull up 601 really quick, just so that folks know that we're going to leave it the way that it was?
Do we still have a quorum? Because I know 2 or 3 people have left.
We do. Okay. We still have 13.
Okay, so we've got the motion.
Well, we have 5.
To leave it the way that you guys had recommended it before. Do we have it?
We have 12, we have a quorum. So yes is a vote to remove, make sure credible source is not in there. Erica,
Yes.
Angela,
Yes.
Sharon already seconded it,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
Mike,
Yes.
Dean,
Yes.
Sean,
Yes.
Nick,
Yes.
Jewel made the motion. Diane, I think you already voted yes.
Yes, thanks.
McCall,
Yes.
Val,
Yes.
and John.
Yes.
Oh, passes unanimously.
All right, just want to ask, because I'm looking at the clock here, we're at our 4:32. We didn't get a chance to look at the definitions in 100 based upon our conversation. Would we be able to stay for 10 more minutes up to 4:45 to take a look at those? So yes or no? Anybody?
I have to jump off. If that's relatively irrelevant, but I have to leave.
I'll stay.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, I can stay till 4:45, but that sometimes means more. So 4:45 is as long as I can stay.
Julie, I am available. I can stay however long we need.
Erica,
Yes, I can stay.
Angela, I see Dean says yes, Mike says yes.
I can
Nick,
stay.
Sharon,
Yes.
John, Val,
Yes.
Diane.
Yes.
Okay,
Diane.
all right. So can we pull up the 100s? Thank you, guys.
Did you send me a new 100?
Yeah. In the Google.
Crystal, do you want to make sure to share that with me for in case you need to leave?
Yeah, I don't see it though. That's the problem. So
let me see.
I didn't have the 300 either, so it's weird.
So if you just search 100, Crystal, because it's under yours. I just didn't share yours. I just edited yours.
Oh,
If
well,
you-
that's
yeah,
totally different. Thank you.
you're welcome. Okay, you guys. So what I did on the definitions for the educator preparation program. So for number 2, oops, we lost the screen. Is for number 2, accredited education preparation program means I just put it back to what it was. For this to go along with the language that is already in place and supports kind of what you guys had talked about of treating alt differently than traditional. And then we removed that second part to go into another piece. It still existed, just we removed it over to a different part of one, being that it wasn't part of a definition. So I guess the question becomes, given now that you've made the decision for 410 to treat to the traditional as this and the alt differently, then the definition, the way that we're currently using it still stands and would work with that. And so this is how it currently exists
Okay.
to match
So-
that.
So no changes then, is that right?
Yeah, that would be right, Sharon. And then moving down to, this was from CISPAC, you guys. There was a recommendation to define the terms for coursework GPA and student teaching portfolio. So this is just my best attempt, if you would, at a rough draft of kind of the definitions of what those would mean. So I don't know what you think, if that's what you intend. And in the GPA, I just used a definition of what a GPA is, specified it for a period of study, that it has to be from a regionally accredited college. I did put that in there. And that it has to be for relative contributions of teaching education program coursework requirements that attribute to that credit value. And I hope John's on the line because he understands this very intricately. And then for student teaching portfolio, it's a collection of artifacts to document evidence of student learning outcomes for teacher education program course requirements. And then the last thing is, you guys, I didn't do anything with successful. That way that it's written currently in rule in 410 sits there for, you know, the number of years of experience, successful teaching experience. But I do want to show you that in the actual definition in rule currently, it just says year of teaching experience. It doesn't necessarily successful in front of that. So I just wanted to share with you that that currently that's how it sits in definition. There would be no recommended changes there to that word. So it'd be no changes to the definition for EPP, no changes to the definition for year of teaching experience, but added definitions for the coursework for GPA and student portfolio.
John, you have your hand up.
Thanks. So two things on the coursework. The way I'm reading that is right now, we currently, when we're making the recommendation, we're looking at content.
Mm-hmm.
What we would be moving to with this would be looking not just at content, but also the courses that we have as part of our approved program. So that would be like Ed Psych and our methods courses and different things. So it would actually allow our programs to really make a recommendation based on all the coursework that a person takes that has already been approved by the board of public ed for our approved program, correct?
Yeah, John, that's how I see it, as it would be like practicum, methodology, content, anything that's required for a particular ed program, whatever their coursework requirements are.
Yeah,
to allow flexibility for an institution to determine that.
I think that most institutions would probably be happy with that. How does that relate to out-of-state candidates, and when we don't have necessarily all of the same requirements? Would they have to submit like a course book or something that shows the different courses that were required in their state? And I don't need an answer to that. I'm just kind of throwing that out there.
Yeah, John, we wrote it that the EPP, wherever they would go, would have to verify on a special form, like on the university recommendation form, that they did obtain a 3.0 or higher in coursework for their ed program.
Perfect. And then with that portfolio, I just want to really be clear. Most, if not all of our programs at one time had a portfolio requirement. And we primarily did that so that folks could go into an interview and show samples of the work that they had done. So lesson plans, unit plans, work they collected during student teaching, things like that. It's been a number of years since any of our institutions have required a portfolio, and we moved away from it because the administrators weren't requesting it or looking at it when they went into interviews. So while we have collected that information in the past, it isn't something that most of our institutions are currently collecting or doing. Not that we can't. I do like that you have a little bit more language about it, but I think that really would have to be more specified into what exactly you want us to have to do, and what do we need to collect for them.
Yeah, and I think, John, the way we currently have it, right, is it's an option. So if your program doesn't offer it and set that up however works for them, then that's not an option for a person there. They'd have to go the route of the coursework or the praxis.
Yeah, I'm just saying, I think it would be helpful if we kind of knew these are the pieces of evidence that would be acceptable in a portfolio.
Okay.
And so, you know,
Can you, Crystal, can you pull down that definition a little bit further for me there? So in the collection of artifacts, do you want something, do you want a list there, John, of something in there, like a, for example, kind of thing?
well, I think it's probably better to define some key artifacts. You know, they don't have to be really dialed in, but if we had, we have standards that we have to meet. So if there were specific standards, even that, you know, it's a collection of artifacts that demonstrate mastery of the following standards, you know, something like that. Just a collection of artifacts, I'm afraid that you're going to get a whole bunch of scrapbooks because it's not well defined. Because we can absolutely do that. We just need to know what you want.
Okay, so let's put that in there, John. So Crystal or Tristan, I don't know who's running that there. In that artifacts there, can we change that to say it's a collection of artifacts to document evidence of student learning outcomes? Do you want to say something? You said standards, John, like.
Well, I think what you
again?
have, I think what you have here is it's a little vague. I would want you to really define the standards that we have to meet for licensure and what you would want, you know, at the standards kind of level. Then I think that gives us flexibility, and it truthfully gives someone coming from out of state flexibility too. If we just say, these are the standards you have to evidence, but we don't have to wordsmith it right now. I'm just kind of saying, I think that might be a good direction to take this.
Yeah, and John, there was another definition somewhere you know, in my travels, I sometimes don't remember, but where it's like aligned with 1058-501, the general standards for programming. It doesn't need to meet necessarily those, but it's aligned to those. So I can work on that.
Yeah, and then of course, I don't know, thinking about, you know, you folks at OPI, a portfolio could be a very cumbersome review process.
Again, that's not something we would review. We've written it as that it's that the institution would have to sign off on it through a university recommendation.
Perfect. All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So sorry, is there any wordsmithing we're doing here, or is the assumption
Just
that?
take some notes, Eric.
Okay, all right, so.
Thanks.
OPI and John will follow up and discuss.
All right, any final motions on these definitions, you guys, before they turn into recommendations to the superintendent? John, do you have your hand up again, or I'm just catching you now?
Nope, I just forgot to take it down.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, guys, one last thing on military spouses and dependents. There was a lot of conversation around the dependents piece, that that recommendation to consider removing the dependents and it just being for military spouses. So thoughts on that? You want me to leave dependents on there, or do you want me to put just spouses?
Julie, I was trying to listen when you were presenting to suspect. Did you get any, I mean, what's the feedback on removing the dependents? What was the reasoning, or who came up with that, or when was that discussed?
That was Dan who added that about the dependents.
Yeah, I remember added, but what brought up maybe taking it out?
Just that, like, what does that mean when you say dependents, right? Like, well, who are the dependents? Because are they, you know, like, are they living at, like, what would constitute somebody who has a degree that's a dependent that would come through the military component? So it's like, why dependents was the question.
So I am a dependent to a military spouse, and my daughter's a dependent. And she could have her teacher's license. I guess maybe if they're like 4 years out of high school, so they have their degree in teaching, would they still be living at home? They don't have to be. They can be a dependent until they're, I believe, 25. I want to say 25.
It's 26, but would they be living with you, Val?
Well, my son was.
Like, would they be moving with you, since this is about reciprocity? So say that you got transferred to Kansas, would that person, that's the question.
Yeah, and I mean, I get it. I suppose if they were living with me still and we were moving to another state, I would hope that they would move with me. Should that? Yeah, I don't know. That's
how it was being asked at CISPAC. That's why I'm asking those questions.
Okay, so Angela McCall.
I guess I would be fine with the dependent language. I think whatever is most inclusive for these men and women. So I think that would, I hear the important questions being asked and answered. And it may be something as simple as maybe the applicant providing a tax return where they were declared as a dependent by mom and dad. I don't think, I think it might take that as a part of it, but I think whatever might be more inclusive of these military men and women, that's what I would support. So, and I think dependence does that.
Okay. McCall.
Thanks, Julie. I was actually just going to reiterate some of the comments that were made by CISPAC, and I see that you've got them pulled up now.
Yeah.
I think the dependent conversation, and you just reiterated that as well, that it was really about moving. And I think Crystal said it kind of in the vein that CISPAC was thinking of it, is like, will these dependents be moving with their families if they're moving to other states? I think that's really what the discussion with CISPAC was. I don't know either way how they were feeling about it. I do think that there is one clarification to be made, though, Julie. In the first, in 1057-221-1, I think you need to put, oh, you did change it. Never mind. Okay. So it looks like it's changed now. But other than that, those were just the comments I was going to say, is those that to reiterate this back.
Okay. All right. So it sounds like you guys, that's everything really. So I'm going to take you guys, the pieces that we worked on today, we're going to get them in the tracker. Okay. On that magical tracker you just saw there. And kind of get those final pieces in there. And then, as was indicated at the top of the hour, a request to say, can you please send us a copy of what the final recommendations are that are going to the superintendent. So you'll be getting an email from Tristan with those recommendations, those final recommendations that are going to the superintendent, and it'll be in that tracker. Okay. And then that way you can be able to follow that. So that's all that I have for you. Please note, again, mark your calendars if you're interested in coming on January 4th to CISPAC. And then January 13th to the Board of Public Ed. And I really just want to say thank you directly from me and from the superintendent and from the team here at the OPI for all your dedication, time, and effort through this process. It's been a lot of good work and a lot of good discussion, and I think has brought us to a good place that we can take these recommendations that you've put a lot of care and thought into to the superintendent for her to have some really good things to be thinking about and looking at. So I just wanted to say thanks.
Julie, was that January 4th at 3:30?
It is January 4th at 3:30.
Okay, thank you.
McCall, that's correct, right? It's going to be offered both in person and virtually.
It is, yeah. Our chair of CISPAC actually lives in Helena, so we'll have a room at the Capitol, but majority of our other members will likely participate virtually. So we'll have both options.
Okay. All right, you guys. Jewel, did you have a question for me?
Yes, just one final comment. And so I need to tell all of you, thank you very much. And I've appreciated the task force and all of you through this process. I guess my last comment would be taking the language that we have approved today with what they did in chapter 58. Are they in alignment or in a crosswalk view? Are they going to be acceptable and working together to accomplish what we need to?
Yeah, we did a crosswalk with 57 and 58, Jewel. And 58 will be coming to the Board of Public Ed in March. They're not in January. And so just so you know that, but yes, we'll be continuing to kind of be sure that those are in alignment. And then it even's got to continue, right? Once chapter 55 opens, we've got to continue to crosswalk pieces there. As you guys have mentioned even in our last task force meeting around really wanting to look at 55 and, you know, the comparison for mentorship. So I think that that will be a piece that we're continuing to really monitor and thinking about how those pieces connect. Hey, you guys, that's all that I have for you. Thank you so much. And I appreciate you hanging out there. And I hope you get some snow soon. Bye-bye.